Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. What do you basically need when you want to paint with acrylic paint? There are no doubt many answers to that question and I really don't know them all. But in this video I will try to give you my best recommendations on what I believe would be a good thing to get. There will be both nice and needs, and there are really no rights and wrong. It all depends on what and how you want to paint. I will structure this video around four things. Something to paint on, something to paint with, the paint itself, and all the other stuff. And in the end of the video, I will show you how I did this piece only using the stuff I just recommended. My name is Henrik Skora. Let's get started. When I think back to when I changed from painting with oil to start painting with acrylic, I had no idea of what to get. There are, of course, many similarities between oil and acrylics. However, basically the two types of paints are fundamentally very different. For hundreds of years, painters all over the world have been using oil paint. Acrylic paint first appears in the middle of the 19th century, and it took a long time before it became common to use in an artistic context. Up until today, you can meet qualified people who believe that acrylic paint cannot be used if you consider yourself a serious artist. If you compare the reputation of oil to acrylics, the oil paint is much better. However, today I don't think that is actually right. It all depends on what you paint and how you paint it, the way you work. When looking at the two types of paints, the most significant differences between them are: acrylic paint doesn't smell. Oil does. Acrylic paint is water-based and you dilute and clean your materials with ordinary water from the tap. Oil paint, on the other hand, is based on oil, no surprise, and it's thinned with many things, for example, linseed oil and turpentine. Both of those substances smell. Acrylic paint dries significantly faster than oil paint, 15 to 30 minutes, and the acrylic paint is dry, while it takes several days or even weeks before the oil is completely dry. In practice, the work process and speed are quite different. The oil paint binds more pigment than acrylic paint, and therefore the oil can appear more brilliant or vibrant than acrylics. There are actually many more differences between the two kinds of paints, and you can mix all kinds of stuff in the paint in order to change completely the properties I just mentioned. However, this is not a video about the differences, so let's not get carried away. My two best advices up front: go for quality, not quantity, and buy the best quality you can afford. To me, part of the fun is to work with the good stuff. It's faster, it's better, it's more durable, and it's more enjoyable. And I find the materials kind of delicious. It puts me in a good mood when I go into an art supply store and look at the brushes and the paint. However, the best quality is often the most expensive. So if you feel like me, take care. I tend to overbuy when I go into a art supply store and look at all the nice stuff they got. Using high quality is also connected to the fact that I try to make a living out of painting. I usually sell my paintings, and when a customer pays a relatively large amount of money for one of my works, the quality of the painting and the used materials must match the price. For example, my paintings cannot fade after hanging on a wall for a few years. Therefore, I'm very careful about the quality of the materials I use for my painting. The first thing you need is something to paint on. In my case, it will often be a canvas, but actually you can use a lot of other things. You can paint on paper, you can paint on all kinds of board, maybe prepared with gesso. You can also paint on glass and all kinds of fabrics. The only thing you can't paint on is oil surfaces. You can paint oil painting on an acrylic background, but not the other way around. My best advice regarding canvases are: buy a decent quality. It makes no sense to save a few bucks taking into consideration how many hours you're actually going to use working on that surface. There are two main types of canvases on the market. It is linen and cotton. I often paint on good cotton canvas. Cotton is cheaper than linen. Linen is stronger and more durable, but also more expensive. Approximately 60 to 70% more than cotton. Not double price, but we are talking about something like that. I use a cotton which is reinforced with nylon threads woven into the fabric, and I have been very satisfied with that for many years now. It's extremely strong and it will not crack. So even though I just said I only go for the best, I recommend that you save the money, buy a good quality of cotton, and then use this money you save to buy better colors. Stretching your canvases yourself is the cheapest, but it's also the most difficult. So if you're just getting started, wait until you have more momentum in your production. Buy good finished canvases in the sizes you want. I use this size only for sketching. This is a little better. This is 13 times 40, but I recommend you to buy one of these. It is 40 times 40 centimeters. And buy one of these. It is 50 times 50 centimeters. And when you have done those two, you might consider buying a larger format, which is this one. It is 60 times 80 centimeter, and it's a very good size. You can really have fun on this kind of surface. Also, when you get up in this larger format, the wood here are glued together of several minor pieces of wood, which make it very durable. These are a little more expensive, but definitely worth the money. The next thing you will need will be something to paint with. You can paint with your fingers, you can paint with sponges, you can paint with different kind of cloth, but often I use a normal brush. The brushes, you need to buy them often and you need to buy them in a good quality. Painting with acrylic will wear down the brushes a lot. Depending on how you paint, the canvas will relatively quickly eat the brushes, and at least for me, it is essential to have sharp pointed brushes. It is important to buy brushes intended for acrylic colors. It means that the hair must be synthetic and not too stiff. Brushes for acrylics are often dark, and the other way around for brushes meant for oil. The white ones can actually be used for acrylics, but they will wear out even faster than the synthetic ones. I would start buying some small round ones, some larger flat ones, and one big flat one. Small round brushes, I recommend you buy two of number 2 size. It's very small brush and it's for the finer work, the fine lines and the finer details in a painting. For flat brushes, I would buy 2 pieces of number 4, 1 piece of number 10 and 1 piece of number 12. And the corners also for them must be sharp when they are wet. Some like the filbert brush, which is round, very versatile. And I know a lot of people actually prefer this one, but I like the flat ones better. However, you may like the filbert. I like to use brushes with short handles, but the long ones are just as good, especially for larger paintings where you paint with a greater distance to the canvas. It actually has something to do with the balance of the brush. Then you need at least one very big flat brush to moisten your canvases and for larger surfaces. It can be these ones. They are fine. They are also quite thin, which make them ideal for this kind of work. Thicker ones will be fine also for lacquer and maybe also for moistening your canvas. But take into consideration that this brush will hold about 10 euros of your expensive artist color. And then the most important thing, the paint, which is the soul of a painting. Buy the best quality you can afford. It really pays off. The general rule is that the more expensive, the better it is. Avoid buying the very cheap stuff. It's not worth your money. A tube like this mainly consists of two things: pigment and acrylic mass or polymer. You pay for the pigment. The cheaper colors you buy, the less or worse pigment you get. The pigment is a colored fine powder. The consistency is somewhat like flour, and this pigment is the color. Acrylic polymer just is a kind of glue that holds the pigment. Acrylic polymer is white like milk, and when it dries it becomes crystal clear, so you only see the pigment. The fact that it's white is why the acrylic color looks a little lighter when you paint with them. And when a painting is dry, it will look a little bit darker. If you want to save a little money, you may consider buying your earth colors in a less expensive quality. Another piece of advice is buy the normal colors. Wait with buying the more exotic colors like potter's pink and special Königblau, for instance. But be aware, when you mix the colors, they will fade and have a slightly less radiant power than if you buy the pure factory-made color. That's mainly why there actually are so many different colors you can buy. Most factories produce at least two grades: a cheap, budget-friendly one and an expensive one. For example, Sminke has a prime acrylic, which is for professional use, and then an academy acrylic, which is for school and education purpose. The cheap ones are actually okay, especially if you paint very big, but far from as good as the expensive ones. Brands like Amsterdam, Galleria, System 3, Vallejo acrylic are really all fine. All are called something like Studio or Academy. They are relatively cheap colors. The more expensive colors are called something like Prime Acrylic, Artist Acrylic, or Artist Quality, or something else. You can roughly count as the rule of thumb that the expensive ones are also the best ones. Buy the Artist Quality if you can afford it. I prefer a brand called Golden. It's always really good. Sminke, Prima, Acrylio, and most Rembrandt's colors are also really good, but there are a lot of very good products that I even don't know. So find out and go and try them out and tell me about them. Let's talk about the colors you absolutely need if you want to paint. First of all, you need the titanium white. This is a very opaque color, and opaque means that you will be able to cover whatever you are painting completely. So it's a cover, is the ability to cover a surface. The opposite of opaque is transparent. You cannot mix to white, so you need the white. If you don't want to buy the expensive white, this one is a great alternative, or any studio quality white will do. Then you need cadmium red, cadmium yellow, and ultramarine blue. With these three colors, you will be able to mix all the rest. This one is the color wheel. I believe Newton was the first one to actually make this, but this one is the version of Johann Easel of the Bauhaus school in Germany. So, if you only have these three colors and white, you will be able to mix almost any other colors. But take into consideration that if you mix the colors, they will fade. The end result will be a little bit muddy, and that's because these colors are not completely clean. So, I suggest that you have a slightly bluish or greenish yellow, because this one is actually a little bit orange. The cadmium yellow is a little bit orange. And then the red one, I suggest that you get an Alizarian crimson, which is a little bit bluish or a little bit violet. This one is a little bit orange, so it tends to go up here. I suggest that you get some kind of green, maybe permanent green, or, as I use a lot, sap green. You might also consider buying some kind of violet. You can actually mix a nice violet with these two, because this one is a little reddish and this one is a little bluish, so it will be a nice violet. However, if you got a produced with a pigment of violet, it would be much clearer and much more vibrant. These are the extra colors I would suggest. However, also it would be nice with an orange. This is a cadmium orange. If you mix these two, you can get a nice orange, but still this one will be much more clear and vibrant. This is the second row of colors I would suggest. Then finally there are the earth pigment, which is burnt umber. I'll just take this away. This will be burnt umber, burnt sienna, and some kind of yellow ochre. These colors will give you a very good base to get started with. You may wonder why I didn't mention the black one. Actually, you will be able to mix black with burnt umber and some kind of blue. You can also use a slightly bluish black, which is this one, Payne's or Pines Gray. I don't know actually how it is pronounced. And then there are all the other stuff. First of all, the easel. I use two kinds of easels. One of them is standing on the floor and the other one is standing on the table. The floor easel must be very stable and not too light, because it must be possible to operate it with only one hand. Then a large bucket of clean water to clean brushes and dilute the paint. Some uses 2 buckets of water, but I only use 1. Then you need some kind of palette. Preferably it must be with paper. I like to be able to tear off the used paper. Then I use many small glass mixing bowls. They are to be round, because otherwise you can't stir or mix the colors. These are stackable so that they can stand on top of each other, sort of sealing each other. So in this way the color won't dry out so quickly. Also, I have this atomizer, which is nice. You can moisten your canvas or use it for all kinds of stuff. Be careful with the water. Too much water mixed in the acrylic paint will make the acrylic mass or the acrylic polymer so thin that it cannot hold the pigment. When I have this need, I use this one, which is sort of milk that you can use to dilute your painting, and you can use it all you want and it will not affect the sustainability of the paint. A small palette knife and also a mini whisk for stirring. Then I use such a one. It's a towel and I keep it here on the side of my trolley, and then I sort of connect it so it's very tight. So when I do this, I can easily and then have something else in my other hand. And then soap, one specially designed for cleaning brushes, will save your brushes for a longer period of time, especially the bigger ones. These were my tips on acrylics. I hope you enjoyed them. And now let's go to this painting. I'll show you how I painted this from the start. This is a kind of painting that I like to do when I'm in between paintings. I like the flowers, the motif flowers a lot, and this is 50 times 50 centimeters, which is not a small painting, but not really a large one. So you can really have fun with this size and not using many weeks on it. So Let's see what happens.
The first thing I do when I stand in front of the white canvas is to moisture the canvas. I use the modeler to loosely sketch, and also smaller brushes to sketch what direction I think that this painting will take. I don't know actually if it's the right direction, but it doesn't really matter because I don't know the end result, so you might as well just go with whatever you have right now when you start. I use only a few colors here, the main colors: orange, green, blue, brown, yellow, just to sort of order up the composition. This painting will be about the conflicts between the orange here and the blue and green background. The flowers on their stalks have many lines, and many shapes in this painting will be what hold it together. I use the palette knife as well as the brushes, and I am very cautious all the time to keep the surface wet or moistured at least. The forms on the flowers will be different from the forms of the rest of the painting, and the flowers will sit on stalks, and there will be many vertical lines going through the painting. I will try to drag the yellow colors and the flowers to the front of this painting. And right now I feel the need to establish another layer in front and in the bottom of the painting. And this is what I'm doing now. Some of the stalks will go in front and some of them will go behind. And this will establish some kind of depth in the painting. When something occurs in the painting I don't like, I paint it away using titanium white. The greens are made mainly from ultramarine and cadmium yellow, but also I use the sap green and mix it with a cadmium yellow or with prime yellow. If I use the prime yellow, the color will be more transparent, and I don't use that a lot in this painting. The brush I use here is a number 6 flat brush with a short handle. It's a Da Vinci brush. The blue line, which is very nice, it's not very expensive. When you are this close to the canvas, it's very convenient not to have brushes with long handles. I use the two kind of green, one with the ultramarine and one based on the sap green, and set them close in order to make the illusion of movement. Also, I introduce the ultramarine now to make a bigger contrast to the orange flowers. Contrasting colors like blue and orange, green and red are really holding this composition together. That's where the eye is going. You can see I'm having a little trouble loosening this top of the tube, so I use fabric in order to get a grip. This is where the painting is now. Quite promising, I think, so I don't hesitate to go on. And now I try to establish what kind of orange I really need. As I said when I started, I will only use the colors I recommended in earlier on in this video. And this orange is a slightly muted orange, and it's created by mixing cadmium yellow and cadmium red. I will supplement this muted orange with a more vibrant one. I take it from a finished tube with a finished pigment from the manufacturer. This is cadmium orange. It's very nice combination with this muted orange and this more vibrant. It sort of brings the flowers to life. I'm really fond of the thin lines, and I use them whenever I have the opportunity. This was the green one, and this one is a black one made from Payne's gray and a little bit of titanium white. I like to surround the forms of some of the items on the canvas in order to pull them forward in the painting. Then I try to paint the thin lines even thinner by using a larger flat brush. Also, I like to create this kaleidoscopic effect, and I combine the hand-drawn lines with the straight lines from a ruler. This is actually a stretcher wood. I've got it from a dead canvas from way back. I try to limit the use of rulers because it will stand out quite different than the hand-drawn line in the painting. And now it's time to introduce the earth colors, which is burnt umber and brown sienna, burnt sienna, and also yellow ochre. I use different shades of blue, ultramarine mixed with white, and this makes a fine contrast to the earth colors. Often I like to add small areas or spots only using contrasting colors. Makes movements, I think. Also, I bring in violet, which is contrasting color to yellow. I try to remember always to use many different nuances of green. It's bringing life to the canvas or to the painting, of course. We are now closing in on the end result. I have this feeling or theory that I excavate the painting. It's all there, I just need to get down to it. You can see I often use my thumb to make some blurry effect. Also, I tried to make the shapes of the leaves a little bit simpler in order to fit into the rest of the composition. I don't know really how I judge this, but it's sort of a feeling, I think. I'm a little bit unsatisfied with this. I like to break the lines. If you are too much aligning all the shapes, it feels a little bit weak. And now I bring in the titanium white to create light in the painting. I really like these thin lines and I draw them all the time. I make it by holding one finger, making that touch the canvas, so I can keep the exact same distance to the canvas. And now I like when I go, we are close to the end now, so I like to find where I can put in some contrasts. This is very close to the final work. You know, this process can go on for quite a while, and I will add something and take it away and add it maybe exactly the same again. I found that there was some unbalance. at the lower part of the painting. So I added a dark square at the lower left corner of the painting. And now I'm finished, and I seal my colors with this box. So I sit for actually a very long time looking at the painting. I drink a cup of coffee, maybe I eat something, and I leave the room and come back looking for stuff to make things better. Yes, and now I believe we are finished, so I take out the canvas and paint the side with this dark gray or black, and then I will put it in a frame that will give it sort of a finished look.
I wish you a lot of fun with your painting. Experiment until you find your own way. Have fun. And that's it. The painting is finished. At least it's finished for now. I hope you liked the video, and if you did, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.